I sat in the cold reception area, clutching my bag to my chest like a shield. The clock on the wall read 15 minutes past 4. Ethan was sitting next to me, flipping through some financial magazine, occasionally glancing at me with that look on his face that always made me feel guilty. "How much longer?" he muttered without looking up. "I have an appointment at 6. "I don't control the doctor's schedule," I replied quietly, feeling the familiar knot of fear tighten in my stomach. "You don't control anything, Martha," he said with that smile I'd learned to recognize as dangerous after 30 years of marriage. "If you took better care of your health, we wouldn't have to sit here every month." I didn't say anything. Over the years, I had learned that any answer would only make the situation worse. 55 is the age when you get tired of fighting. "Martha Bennett?" The nurse opened the door with a smile that seemed almost sympathetic. I stood up, but Ethan grabbed my elbow. "You'll mess up again," he said, standing up. The nurse gave him a quick glance, but said nothing. They never say anything. 30 years of humiliation had made me invisible to others, a middle-aged woman with slumped shoulders and a habit of speaking in whispers to avoid attracting attention. The corridor was long and sterile white. The new clinic was on the other side of town, far from our neighborhood. My regular doctor had retired, and Ethan insisted on this place. "The best in Portland," he said. "Your blood pressure is still high, Mrs. Bennett," the nurse said as she took my vitals, "and your pulse is faster than it should be." "She's just nervous," Ethan said, always dramatic. The nurse took us to an office where we waited another 10 minutes. I looked at my hands, pale, with visible veins and age spots. I used to have beautiful hands. I remember Liam, my son, saying when he was little that my hands were the most beautiful in the world. Now, at 28, he rarely notices anything about me unless it involves money or favors. The door opened and a doctor entered the office. Dr. Wainwright was younger than I expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with attentive eyes and a calm smile. "Mrs. Bennett, nice to meet you." He shook my hand, then turned to Ethan. "And you must be minus Ethan Bennett, the husband." He emphasized the last word as if it gave him special rights. "Someone has to make sure she reports her symptoms correctly." I noticed the doctor's eyebrows waver slightly, but he quickly returned his professional expression. "Well, Mrs. Bennett, tell me what's bothering you." And I began to tell him about the constant fatigue, dizziness, nausea, trembling in my hands, about how sometimes I wake up at night because I can't breathe. "It's all psychosomatic," Ethan interrupted. "Her daughter Zoe studied psychology, says her mother is just looking for attention." "Mr. Bennett," Dr. Wainwright turned to him with a professional but cold smile, "I'd like to hear from the patient first. Then we can discuss possible causes." Ethan leaned back in his chair with an expression that promised me a conversation at home. I continued, trying not to look in his direction. I told him about the problems with sleeping, how food sometimes tastes strange, even though everyone else says it's normal. Dr. Wainwright listened intently, taking notes. His eyes narrowed from time to time when I mentioned certain symptoms. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "About a year, but it's been worse for the last 3 months. Is there a history of heavy metal poisoning in your family?" "No, nothing like that." I shook my head. "I'm an accountant. I've been working in an office for 20 years. "She just doesn't follow the diet I made for her," Ethan interjected. "I monitor her diet, but she eats junk all the time when I'm not around." "You made a diet for your wife?" The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a medical degree, Mr. Bennett?" "I don't need a medical degree to know what's healthy and what's not," Ethan said. "Martha takes special supplements that I order for her." "What kind of supplements?" "Various vitamins, minerals. I don't remember all the names." Dr. Wainwright wrote something down in his notebook, then turned to me. Mrs. Bennet, I need to take some tests from you. I'd also like to do a physical exam. The next half hour was spent in standard procedures, measurements, weighing, blood draws. All the while, Ethan sat in the corner of the room, watching every move, every word. When Dr. Wainwright started checking my reflexes, he suddenly stood up. Excuse me, I need to use the restroom. Where is it? Just down the hall and to the left, the doctor answered without looking up from his examination. As soon as the door closed behind Ethan, Dr. Wainwright changed. His movements became faster, his gaze intense. Listen carefully, he said quietly, continuing to check my pupils as if nothing was happening. You have symptoms of chronic poisoning. I can't be sure without more tests, but I have serious suspicions. Poisoning? I whispered. But I have a background in toxicology, and I don't like what I see. He glanced quickly at the door. Don't let on that anything has changed. Carry on as usual. I felt a chill go through my body. Do you think that? Don't say anything, he interrupted. And don't do anything out of the ordinary. I'm going to put something in your bag. Don't take it out until you're alone. He went to the desk, took the stethoscope, and turned to me just as the door opened and Ethan walked in. His face was calm, but I knew that look. He was suspicious. Everything okay? He asked, looking at the doctor. Absolutely. Dr. Wainwright replied with a professional smile. Mrs. Bennet, your heart sounds fine, but I'd like to run a few more tests. Please leave this bag here, and a nurse will help you to another room for an electrocardiogram. I noticed him discreetly put something in the outer pocket of my bag as he leaned over, ostensibly to check my pulse again. The next 40 minutes passed in a fog. I went from one room to another, taking tests, answering questions, all the while feeling Ethan's eyes on me. When we finally got back to Dr. Wainwright's office, he was waiting for us with a file in his hand. Preliminary results show anemia and elevated inflammatory markers, he said, looking at me, not Ethan. I'll put you on iron supplements and B vitamins, but I want to see the results of your blood work before I make any final conclusions. Is that all? Ethan seemed almost disappointed. We drove all the way across town for this? Health is not something to be rushed, Mr. Bennet, the doctor replied calmly. Mrs. Bennet, I'd like to see you in a week for a follow-up. In the meantime, rest, take the medications I prescribe, and keep an eye on how you feel. As we left the office, Dr. Wainwright shook my hand firmly and held it for a moment. Be careful, he said so quietly that I barely heard him, and read the instructions for your medications carefully. On the way home, Ethan was silent, which was a bad sign. His silence always meant that he was building up anger that would come out later. I looked out the window at Portland in autumn. Gray skies, trees losing their leaves, people hurrying home. It seemed to me that my life was passing behind glass, like this landscape, close but out of reach. Did you know this doctor before? Ethan suddenly asked, not taking his eyes off the road. No, of course not. He looked at you strangely. Ethan turned onto our street. And what's all this nonsense about metal poisoning? He was just asking about possible causes, I said, trying to sound calm. He parked the car in front of our two-story house. Liam and Zoe are coming over for dinner. I want everything ready by 7. It wasn't a request. It was an order, as always. When we entered the house, I went straight to the kitchen. It was my usual ritual to come home and start cooking, no matter how I felt. Ethan went to his office, leaving his bag in the hallway. 20 minutes later, as I was chopping vegetables for a salad, he called out to me. His voice was too calm, another bad sign. Martha, come in for a minute. I dried my hands on a towel and walked slowly to his office, feeling my heart beat faster. Dash, dash. Yes? He was sitting at his desk, holding the phone. I just called the clinic. Dr. Wainwright wasn't in today. He's been on vacation for a week. I felt the blood drain from my face. But how? We just. That's right. We saw someone who said he was Dr. Wainwright. I. I don't understand, I mumbled, feeling the floor shake under my feet. Neither do I. Ethan stood up. But I intend to find out. In the meantime, forget about the medication he prescribed. I'll take care of your treatment myself, as I always do. Okay, I replied quietly, backing away to the door. I'll get back to cooking. Yes, do that. He sat down at the table again, making it clear that the conversation was over. Returning to the kitchen, I continued to prepare dinner with mechanical movements. Thoughts whirled in my head like autumn leaves in the wind. Who was that doctor? Why did he say I was being poisoned? And what did he put in my bag? At 6:30, Liam and Zoe came over. My son, tall and thin, with his father's cold eyes, and my daughter, beautiful, but with a constantly dissatisfied expression. They came in without knocking, as usual, threw their jackets on a chair and walked into the living room, where Ethan was waiting with a glass of whiskey. Mom, you've lost weight again, Zoe said, assessing me with her eyes. Thank you for your concern, I replied, setting the table. I went to the doctor today. And what did he say? Liam asked, pouring himself a drink. Anemia and inflammation, Ethan answered for me. I'll tell you over dinner. Dinner went on as usual. Ethan talked. The kids listened. I kept quiet and served the food. He told me about the strange doctor, laughing at how easy it was to cheat the system. Probably some kind of scammer, Liam said, piling on more potatoes. As if she's ever been careful, Zoe snorted. Remember when she gave $200 to that guy who was collecting for surgery? That's enough, Ethan said, though his eyes were laughing. That's why I'm watching her. I looked at the three of them, my family, talking about me as if I wasn't there. Three people I loved more than anything in the world, and who, what? How did they feel about me? Did they feel anything but irritation? After dinner, when I was washing the dishes and Ethan and the kids were watching TV in the living room, I remembered the bag. It was still lying in the hallway where Ethan had left it. I quietly walked over, picked it up, and headed for the bathroom. Where are you going? Ethan called out. To the bathroom, I replied. I took the bag to get some medicine for my headache. Okay, he turned back to the TV. In the bathroom, I locked the door and opened the outer pocket of my bag with trembling hands. There was a small folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and read a short inscription written in clear doctor's handwriting. Run away from your family immediately. They are slowly poisoning you. Do not drink or eat anything they give you. Call this number when you are alone. There was a phone number at the bottom. I read the note 3 times, feeling panic grip me. It had to be a mistake, some terrible misunderstanding. My family couldn't be poisoning me. Why? How? Why? But then images began to appear in my head. Ethan insisting that I take special vitamins, food with a strange taste, Zoe always checking to see if I drank my tea before bed, Liam, who asked about my insurance last month. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, holding the note in my shaking hands, feeling the world crumble around me. Could I trust this stranger who claimed to be a doctor? But then, why had Ethan checked out the clinic so quickly? I heard a knock on the door. Martha? Did you fall asleep in there? Ethan sounded irritated. The kids will be leaving soon. Come out and say goodbye. Yes, now, I answered, quickly hiding the note in a secret pocket of my wallet. I washed my face with cold water, trying to make it look normal, and left the bathroom, returning to a reality that suddenly felt alien and threatening. But now my eyes were wide open, and I could see things I hadn't noticed before. The wary glances Ethan and the kids exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, the intense smiles they gave me, and the way Zoe had discreetly sprinkled some powder into the cup of tea Ethan had handed me before bed. The tea, which I now refused to drink, was poured into the flower pot when everyone went to bed. That night, I lay awake listening to Ethan's breathing next to me and realized that the doctor had just saved my life. The morning after the doctor's visit began as usual. Ethan woke up first, took a shower, and went down to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. This has been his morning ritual for the past few years. I used to be surprised at this change. Until he was 50, he had never gone near the kitchen. Now, as I lay in bed listening to the sounds from downstairs, I thought about how much time I had spent rejoicing in his care. The note from the strange doctor was hidden under the lining of the underwear drawer. At night, when Ethan finally fell asleep, I read it several times. Part of me wanted to believe that it was some kind of terrible misunderstanding or even a joke. But the other part had been feeling that something was wrong for a long time. Martha? Ethan's voice came from downstairs. Breakfast is ready. I got up, pulled on my robe, and went down to the kitchen. Ethan was standing at the stove flipping eggs. Two plates were already on the table, one empty and the other with toast and jam. Good morning, he said without turning around. How did you sleep? Fine, I lied, sitting down at the table. He set a plate of scrambled eggs and a glass of orange juice in front of me. Don't forget to take your vitamins, he said, pulling a familiar bottle out of the cabinet, especially after that fiasco with the fake doctor. I looked at the pills in his hand, 3 small white pills. How many years had I been taking them every morning without thinking? 5, 7? I think I'll skip it today, I said, trying to keep my voice lighthearted. I feel better after yesterday. Ethan stood there for a moment, then slowly turned around. His face was calm, but his eyes, there was something cold in his eyes. You know you need them for your health, he smiled, but the smile didn't touch his eyes. Don't be a baby, Martha. I just want a break from the meds today. I shrugged, pretending it was nothing. One day won't change anything. He looked at me for a long moment, then came over and put the pills next to my plate. But they're here if you change your mind. He sat down across from me. By the way, I contacted the clinic. It turns out that Dr. Wainwright did indeed return from vacation yesterday, but he was seeing patients in a different department. The receptionist got confused. I nodded, feeling my heart beat faster. A lie. Another lie. What about that doctor we saw? Someone else, obviously. Ethan took a bite of toast. Probably an intern. I reported it to the clinic management. They'll look into it. I ate my eggs slowly, trying not to show how closely I was watching Ethan. He was calm as usual, but something in his movements seemed tense. When he turned away to pour himself a cup of coffee, I quickly threw the pills into my robe pocket. Drinking? He asked as he turned around. Yes, I replied, taking a sip of orange juice. He nodded, satisfied, and continued eating breakfast. 15 minutes later, he got ready and left for work, kissing me on the cheek as usual, a dry, formal kiss that had long since lost all warmth. As soon as the door closed behind him, I poured the orange juice into the sink and threw the rest of the scrambled eggs in the trash. My heart was pounding. If what the doctor said was true, but why would Ethan poison me? What would he gain from my death? I went up to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to collect my thoughts. I thought back over the past months, years, how my health was gradually deteriorating, how Ethan had become caring, cooking meals especially for me, how our insurance policies had changed. Insurance policies. Something stirred in my memory. I went to the cabinet where I kept important documents. Ethan usually handled all the paperwork, but a few years ago I signed some insurance documents. Something about additional coverage in case of death. Going through the files, I finally found what I was looking for. An insurance policy in my name issued 8 years ago. I ran my eyes over the text until I came to the death benefit amount, $1 million. The beneficiaries were Ethan, Liam, and Zoe in equal shares. $1 million, an amount that could change lives, especially for Liam, who was always talking about starting his own business but didn't have the initial capital. Or for Zoe, who dreamed of owning a house in a prestigious neighborhood. I sat down on the floor amidst the scattered papers, feeling terrified. Did my family, the people I loved more than life, really want me dead for money? That day, I started to watch, really watching, not just existing around, as I had been doing for the past few years. First, I checked the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Among the usual pills for headaches and colds, I found several unlabeled bottles, the same ones Ethan used to give me vitamins. I didn't dare open them, but took a picture with my old phone. Then I went to the basement where Ethan kept his gardening tools and chemicals. On the top shelf were bottles of poison for rodents and insects. One of them was half empty, even though we had never had a problem with rodents. When I returned to the kitchen, I carefully examined the cabinets. In one, behind the cereal jars, I found a small bottle of white powder with no label. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed like it was about to jump out of my chest. I didn't dare open the bottle, but I took a picture of it. At 2 o'clock, Zoe came over. She often came over in the afternoon when she didn't have classes at the university. I heard the front door open and quickly put the kettle on, pretending I was just making tea. "Mom," she called from the hallway. Zoe came in, elegant as ever, with a new hairstyle and a fancy coat. At 23, she looked like a model on the cover of a magazine, and she always made me feel gray and invisible. "How are you?" she asked, throwing her coat on a chair. "Dad said there was some weird stuff with the doctor yesterday." "Yeah, weird," I agreed, getting the cups. "Would you like some tea?" "Sure." She sat down at the table without offering to help. "So, what did the doctor say?" I tried to keep my voice calm. "Nothing much. Anemia, possibly inflammation. He ordered some tests." "And you believe this crook?" Zoe raised an eyebrow just like Ethan had. "I don't know what to think." I put a cup of tea in front of her. "But I feel better today." "Is that because you didn't take those horrible pills?" She laughed, as if she'd said something witty. I froze. "What do you mean?" "Well, the ones your dad gives you?" Zoe shrugged. "They must be pretty strong, judging by the way you fall asleep afterwards." "Fall asleep?" "Yeah." She sipped her tea. "Remember last month when we watched the movie? You drank the tea that Dad made, and 10 minutes later you were snoring." I sat down across from her, trying to hide the trembling of my hands. "What do you think of those pills?" Zoe shrugged again. "I don't know. Dad says they help with anxiety or something. I don't know about that." She suddenly glanced at her watch. "Oh, I have to go. I have a meeting with my supervisor in an hour." She quickly finished her tea, grabbed her coat, and headed for the door. "By the way," she said, turning around, "did you renew your insurance?" "Dad said the old one was about to expire." "Not yet," I answered. "Nothing, just asking." She smiled. "Bye, Mom. Don't forget to take your medication." When the door closed behind her, I sat motionless for a long time, feeling a cold terror gripping my entire body. Now I had no doubts. The strange doctor's note was true. My family was slowly poisoning me. I spent the rest of the day scouring the house for evidence. In Ethan's office, in a desk drawer, I found pharmacy receipts in the name of a Thomas Welch, a name I had never heard before. Among the purchases was a drug whose name told me nothing. I took a picture of the receipt and quickly returned it to its place. Then I checked Ethan's computer. Luckily, he had never changed his password, my maiden name, and the year we were married. How symbolic, I thought, that he was using me as a key to his secrets. In the search history, I found queries that made me feel cold. Arsenic poisoning symptoms. How to detect heavy metal poisoning. How quickly do toxins decompose in the body? Does an autopsy reveal thallium in tissues? And the worst part, the average duration of the death benefit procedure. I took screenshots of everything I found and sent them to my email. Then I carefully erased all traces of my activity on the computer. Around 4 o'clock, I heard the key turn in the lock. Liam, Mom? He called from the doorway. Are you home? Yes, in the kitchen, I answered, quickly closing the cabinet I was examining. Liam walked in, tall and thin, so much like his father that it was sometimes frightening. He threw his bag on the floor and walked over to the fridge. Got anything to eat? I can make a sandwich, I offered. Sure. He sat down at the table and pulled out his phone. I froze, holding the bread in my hands. He called you specifically for that? Yeah. Liam didn't look up from the screen. He said you might forget. I'm surprised he's so concerned, I said, trying to sound casual. I put the sandwich plate in front of him and sat down across from him. What do you think about my medication? I asked him directly. He finally looked up from his phone. What do you mean? Have you ever wondered what those pills are? No. He took a big bite of the sandwich. Why? Dad knows what he's doing. He always knows. Yeah, I agreed quietly. He always knows. By the way, Liam swallowed his food. I wanted to ask you about that insurance policy. Which one? My heart started pounding again. Dad said you were thinking about changing the terms? I tried to breathe steadily. Not really. Why do you ask? I'm just curious, he shrugged. Zoe and I have been talking about it. It seems that under the current terms, we get $333,000 each. Not a bad amount. He said it as casually as if he were discussing the weather, as if he wasn't talking about the money he would get after my death. I felt sick. Yes, it's not bad, I agreed. But I hope you won't have to get it for a very long time. Liam laughed. Of course, Mom. We all do. Bullshit. I could see it in his eyes, just like Ethan's. Cold, calculating. After Liam left, I finally took out the doctor's note and looked at the phone number. Could I trust a stranger? But now he seemed like the only person who really wanted to help me. I dialed the number from my home phone, knowing that Ethan was checking my cell phone. Hello? A man's voice said after the third ring. Dash, this is Martha Bennett, I said quietly. You left me a note. Pause. Mrs. Bennett, the voice sounded relieved. I'm glad you called. Are you safe now? Yes, I'm home alone. Good. My name is David Murray. I am a doctor, but I don't work at that clinic. I'm a friend of Dr. Wainwright's, and I was covering for him that day. When I saw your symptoms and your husband's behavior, do you really think I'm being poisoned? I asked, feeling my voice tremble. I'm pretty sure. He replied seriously. Your symptoms are consistent with chronic thallium or arsenic poisoning. Have you found any evidence? I told him about everything I had found, the pills, the searches, the strange conversations with the children. This is crazy, I whispered. Unfortunately, it happens more often than you might think, Dr. Murray said, especially when there's a significant insurance payout. You'll have to act quickly, Mrs. Bennett. If they suspect that you know, they may speed up the process. I'm terrified. What do I do? Right now, you have to continue to pretend you don't know anything. Do not drink or eat anything they give you. Throw away the food secretly, pour out the drinks when no one is looking, and start planning your escape. Escape? The idea seemed incredible. Leave the house I've lived in for 30 years? You can't stay there. You have to disappear, change your name, start a new life. But how? I have no money, no car. Do you have a bank account? A joint one with my husband, a separate one. I thought about it. Yes, a small savings account that I opened before we got married. There are about $5,000 in it. That's enough to get started. Listen, I have a friend in the police force. We can go to him, but I need irrefutable proof. I finished for him. Now it's your word against the words of your honored husband and children. So it's best to just disappear and then collect the evidence when you're safe. I, I understand, I said, though I couldn't really comprehend the whole situation. How much time do I have? It's hard to say. Judging by your symptoms, they are slowly increasing the dose. You could have a few weeks, maybe a month. But if they suspect something, I see, I interrupted. I'll think of something. Good. Call me in 2 days, same time. And be careful, Mrs. Bennett, very careful. I hung up the phone and sat on the floor in the hallway, feeling tears streaming down my face. My life, which had seemed so predictable and well organized, had suddenly turned into a nightmare. The people I loved the most were planning my death, and now I had to plan my salvation. For the next few days, I lived a double life. On the outside, I was the same quiet, submissive Marta, cooking, cleaning the house, answering whenever I was called upon. But inside, I was feverishly thinking of an escape plan. I began to secretly gather things, some clothes, important documents, photos from the past. I put everything in an old duffel bag that I hid in the attic among the Christmas decorations, a place Ethan never looked. Every morning, I pretended to take the pills Ethan gave me, but in reality, I hid them in my pocket and then flushed them down the toilet. When he cooked me special food, I pretended to eat it, but threw it away as soon as possible. On the fourth day, I called the bank and found out that I had $5,123 in my separate account. Not much, but enough to get started. I ordered a new bank card saying that the old one had been lost and asked them to send it to my work colleague's address. On the fifth day, I started looking for a place to go, somewhere far away where no one would find me. During my lunch break at work, I used my coworker's computer to look up information about small towns in other states, places where I could start a new life. On the sixth day, I met with a lawyer, not from the town where we lived, but from the neighboring town. I told him that I wanted to change my will and the beneficiaries of my insurance policy. He was surprised, but didn't ask any questions. I named the Children's Hospital as the beneficiary, thinking that at least this way my death, if it happened, would benefit someone. And it would definitely make Ethan and the kids angry if they did get their way. That evening, I heard Ethan talking to Liam in his office. The door was open and their voices carried into the hallway. "She's suspicious," Liam said quietly. "She's asking strange questions about the medication." "Nonsense," Ethan replied. "She's too trusting. She always has been. But that doctor, forget about him. I've already taken care of it. The main thing is to make sure she takes her pills." "Maybe we should speed things up," Liam sounded concerned. "I'm not sure I can keep this up for much longer." "Don't be a wimp," Ethan cut him off. "A few more weeks and the problem will be solved. Think about the money, Liam. 333,000. It's enough to open that bar you've been dreaming of." I know," Liam sighed. "It's just that sometimes when she gives me that trusting look—" "She's a burden," Ethan interrupted. "She's always been a burden. Think about your future, not her miserable life." I backed away from the door, feeling nausea rising in my throat. Now I had no doubts left. My death was only a matter of time and convenience for them. That night, lying in bed next to the man who planned my murder, I made the final decision. I had to run away, immediately, before it was too late. I waited for Ethan to fall asleep, listening to his breathing. When it became steady and deep, I quietly got up and went to the window. I looked out at the night street, quiet, calm, with rows of neat houses where ordinary families lived. Were they really ordinary? Were there not just as terrible secrets hiding behind their doors? I looked back at the sleeping Ethan, the man with whom I had lived most of my life, the father of my children, the man who was now planning my death. And I realized that the time had come. It was time to start collecting evidence, planning every step and preparing for a new life, a life without constant fear and humiliation, a life without those who thought I was just a means to get money. Returning to bed, I lay down as far away from Ethan as possible. Tomorrow, I would start preparing. My escape plan needed time. I couldn't just disappear without preparation. Ethan would notice something suspicious right away. So, I continued to play the role of an obedient, unsuspecting wife and secretly prepared for a new life. A week later, I received a new bank card, which my colleague Janice silently handed me in an envelope. She didn't ask me anything, although she must have seen the bruises on my wrists, the marks from when Ethan had grabbed me when I accidentally broke his favorite cup. "If you need any help," she said quietly, "just let me know." I nodded, grateful for her silent support, but I couldn't risk dragging her into my situation. The fewer people who knew about my plans, the safer it was for everyone. Every day I took a few things out of the house: documents, clothes, small jewelry that I could sell if necessary. All this was stored in a rented storage room at the bus station. I hid the key in the lining of my purse, where Ethan never looked. I planned the escape for the following Tuesday, a day when Ethan was traveling to a neighboring city to meet with clients and would return late. I would have all day to disappear without a trace. But that evening, everything changed. It was Thursday, a typical fall evening. Ethan came home from work earlier than usual and was strangely silent at dinner. Usually, he would talk about his business, complain about his coworkers, or give me instructions about the housekeeping. But tonight he just sat there, chewing his food mechanically and occasionally giving me strange looks. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked, clearing the dishes. "Why do you ask?" he replied sharply. "You've been quiet today," I shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "Busy," he grumbled. "By the way, Liam and Zoe will be over later. We have some family stuff to discuss." My heart clenched with anticipation. "What time?" "About 9. Make some tea and cakes. And also," he paused, "I'd like you to take your evening medication earlier." "Of course," I agreed, feigning obedience, although inside I was screaming with fear. After dinner, Ethan went to his office, and I stayed in the kitchen to prepare tea and cakes for the family meeting. My hands were trembling as I took out the cups. What were they up to? Why did Ethan want me to take my medication early, so that I would fall asleep and not hear their conversation? At 8:30, he brought me a plain glass of water and 2 pills, one white and one blue. "New?" I asked, pointing to the blue one. "Yes," he answered calmly. "The doctor prescribed them for better sleep. You complained that you didn't sleep well. I didn't complain." "Thank you," I said, and pretended to swallow both pills, but actually hid them behind my cheek. Ethan watched me, then nodded, satisfied, and went back into the office. As soon as he was gone, I spit the pills out into a tissue and slipped it into my pocket. Then I quickly went upstairs to our bedroom, turned off the light, and got into bed, pretending to sleep. 20 minutes later, I heard the front door open and Liam and Zoe enter the house. Their muffled voices came from downstairs and then faded away, as the three of them must have gathered in Ethan's office. I carefully got out of bed and tiptoed to the stairs. Ethan's office was on the first floor, right below our bedroom. If you put your ear to the floor in a certain place, you could hear a conversation. I found out about this by accident a few years ago, but I had never used this knowledge until today. I laid down on the floor and put my ear to the old boards, holding my breath. Are you sure she's asleep? Was Zoe's voice. Absolutely, Ethan replied. I gave her a double dose. She won't wake up until morning. If she wakes up at all, Liam muttered, and the three of them laughed. I was seized with cold terror. Okay, let's get down to business, Ethan continued in a business-like tone. If everything goes according to plan, the insurance payment will be made within 30 days after, well, you know. And the police? Zoe asked. Won't they suspect anything? It will look like a natural death, Ethan assured her. Heart failure due to chronic health problems. I've been working on this story for years. Every doctor we've seen has a record of her heart problems. And her co-workers? Liam said. That accountant Janice? Ethan snorted. She doesn't know anything. Martha doesn't talk to anyone. You know your mother. The perfect victim, isolated, dependent, with no friends to ask uncomfortable questions. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from screaming. They were talking about me as if I were just an obstacle to be removed. 30 years of marriage, 2 children, our whole life together, and not a single drop of love or respect. I still think we should speed things up, Liam said. She's suspicious. I've noticed the way she's been looking at us lately. Don't be paranoid, Ethan said. She's not suspicious. What if she decides to see another doctor? Liam insisted. Someone who isn't in our pocket? She's not going anywhere without my permission. Ethan's voice was cold and confident. She is completely dependent on me financially, emotionally, psychologically. The perfect wife, he laughed, and Zoe echoed his laughter. Okay, she said. Then when? Thanksgiving, I guess, Ethan replied. Symbolic, isn't it? Surrounded by loving family after a festive dinner? Poor Martha will fall asleep and never wake up. Everyone will say what a tragedy, but also what a blessing to go so peacefully, surrounded by loved ones. 3 weeks, Liam muttered. A long time to wait. But it's worth it, Ethan reassured. $1 million divided 3 ways, 333,000 each. Imagine what you could do with that. I'm going to buy that house in Oak Grove, Zoe said dreamily, the one with the pool. And I'm finally going to open my bar, Liam added. A real classy one, not the dump I can afford now. And I'll get rid of the burden I've been carrying for 30 years, Ethan concluded. My life will start anew. They continued to discuss their plans, but I couldn't listen anymore. Slowly, trying not to squeak on the floor, I went back to bed and sat down, wrapping my arms around my knees. A tremor gripped my entire body. It was Thanksgiving. In 3 weeks, they were going to kill me, my own family, the people I had given birth to, raised and loved with all my heart. Memories flew through my mind. Liam, whom I held in my arms when he was sick with chicken pox. Zoe, whom I braided before the first day of school. Ethan, who used to bring me flowers for no reason. There were good times, weren't there? Or had I just made them up to justify years of humiliation and control? I sat there until I heard Liam and Zoe leave. Then I heard Ethan's footsteps on the stairs. I quickly laid down, closed my eyes, and pretended to be deeply asleep. He entered the bedroom, stood for a few seconds watching me, then undressed and lay down next to me. I felt his hand on my shoulder, a light, almost gentle touch. Soon, he whispered so softly that I barely heard him, it will be over soon. I lay still, trying to breathe steadily, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought he must hear it. Ethan's hand stayed on my shoulder for a while longer, then he turned away and soon fell asleep. I lay awake, staring into the darkness. The plan to escape the following Tuesday now seemed too risky. After what I had heard, I realized that I could not stay in that house for another day. I had to leave that very night. When Ethan's breathing became deep and steady, I carefully stood up. I tiptoed over to the closet and took out a small bag I had prepared in advance with a minimum of clothes and toiletries. She added her wallet, phone, and charger. Then I went down to the kitchen. I needed proof something I could show the police when I was safe. I knew where Ethan kept my pills, in a special locker, always locked. But today, in his overconfidence, he might have forgotten to lock it. And so it happened. The locker was open. Inside, I found several bottles without labels. I opened one and saw the same white pills that Ethan gave me every morning. I took a few and put them in a small plastic bag that I hid in my bag. Then I went to Ethan's computer, which he had left on. I was lucky. He hadn't locked the screen. I quickly checked his email and found what I was looking for: correspondence with a man named Ryan, who apparently supplied him with special drugs. One of the emails explicitly mentioned thallium compounds, the poison Dr. Murray had mentioned. I took several screenshots and sent them to my hidden email address. Then I carefully erased all traces of my activity and turned off the computer. On my way back to the stairs, I noticed the open door to the basement. My inner voice told me to go down there. Ethan kept tools, old clothes, and something else in the basement, judging by how carefully he always locked the door. Taking a chance, I turned on the small flashlight on my phone and cautiously walked down the stairs. The basement was large, with several rooms. In one, tools were stored. In another, old furniture and boxes of things. But there was one more room, a small one at the very end of the basement. Its door was locked with a padlock, but the key hung on a nail nearby. Again, Ethan's self-confidence. He never thought I would dare to come in here. With trembling hands, I unlocked the lock and opened the door. What I saw made me hold my breath. The room was set up like a small laboratory. There were flasks, beakers, and scales on the table. On the shelf were a number of bottles with various powders and liquids. And the worst thing was that there was a sheet of paper on the wall with a schedule with dates and doses. My dates. My slow poisoning, scheduled over days and weeks, culminating in Thanksgiving. I took pictures of everything I saw, then carefully walked out, locked the door, and put the key back in place. As I walked up the stairs, I could feel my legs shaking. Now I had no doubts. When I returned to the bedroom, I saw that Ethan was still asleep. His face looked calm, almost peaceful, in the moonlight that came through the curtains. It was hard to believe that this man had planned my murder with such cold blood. I quietly took a warm sweater, jacket, and boots out of the closet. I changed in the bathroom, trying not to make any noise. Then I went back to the bedroom to take one last look at the man with whom I had lived most of my life. I wanted to leave a note, to say something. But what can you say to a person who sees you as an obstacle to money? Who is ready to kill the mother of his children for the sake of an insurance payment? I quietly went down the stairs, grabbing my bag. In the kitchen, I took some food that didn't need to be: cooked bread, cheese, apples, a bottle of water. I put everything in my backpack, which I had previously hidden behind the refrigerator. Then I went to the phone and called the taxi number I had found in advance. Not a local company, but one from a neighboring town so that no one would recognize me. "The taxi will be here in 20 minutes, the dispatcher said. I told him the address of the neighboring house. I didn't want the taxi to stop right outside our house. Then I asked him to take me to the bus station in the neighboring town. "A night bus?" the dispatcher asked with a bit of surprise. "Yes," I answered, "a family emergency." After hanging up, I looked back at the house that had been my home for 30 years. I remembered all the moments, good and bad. I thought about how my life could have turned out differently if I had been stronger, braver, if I had seen the truth earlier. But now, none of that mattered. The most important thing now was to survive, to escape from the people who were planning my death. I went to the dresser in the living room and pulled out an envelope of cash that I had been hiding for years, my emergency money, as I called it. $480. Not much, but better than nothing. Then I remembered my jewelry. Most of them were already in the locker at the bus station, but my wedding ring was still on my finger. I took it off and put it on the coffee table, a symbolic gesture, the end of a 30-year marriage that had turned into a murder plot. There were a few minutes left before the taxi. I decided to leave a false trail as I had planned. I took out a pre-written letter, supposedly from an old friend in Boston, inviting me to come over. I put it in the kitchen drawer where Ethan usually looked for his keys. He would definitely find it there. Then I sent an email to my boss saying that I was taking a family leave and would be back in 2 weeks. That would give me time to disappear without any fuss. I looked at my watch. It was almost 2 in the morning. The taxi should be here any minute. I took one last look up the stairs to the bedroom where Ethan was sleeping. Would he wake up in the morning and find me gone? Would he realize right away that I knew what he was planning? Would he start looking for me? Probably. But by then I will be far away, and I will never return to this house, to these people who called themselves my family, but in reality saw me as an obstacle to money. I opened the front door as quietly as I could. The cool night air hit my face, fresh, clean, full of the promise of a new beginning. In the distance, I saw the headlights of an approaching taxi. Closing the door behind me, I walked toward the car, feeling like I was shedding the burden of my past life with every step. The unknown was ahead, but it did not frighten me as much as the prospect of staying in the house where they planned my death. The taxi stopped and I got into the back seat. "Where are we going?" the driver, an elderly man with kind eyes, asked. "To the Riverside bus station," I answered, feeling my voice tremble. He nodded and started walking. I looked back at the house, which was getting smaller in the back window. Goodbye, old life. Goodbye, Martha Bennett. I pulled out my new phone from my bag, the one I had bought a week ago, with the money I had been secretly saving. I turned it on and dialed Dr. Murray's number. "Hello?" his sleepy voice answered after a few rings. "This is Martha Bennett," I said, "and I need your help." The spring sun flooded the small kitchen with warm light. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee, looking through the job listings in the local newspaper. 6 months. 6 months since the night I ran away from my family, leaving 30 years of life behind. My name was Ellen Warren now. A new name, a new life, a new beginning. Dr. Murray helped me with the paperwork through a friend of his, a former FBI agent who specialized in witness protection. Not exactly legal, but as the doctor said, sometimes what's right is more important than what's legal. I ran my hand through my short hair, another change that helped me look different. Instead of the long graying hair I had worn all my life, I now had a short haircut dyed a reddish shade. Contact lenses changed the color of my eyes from brown to green. I even started wearing glasses with simple glasses, a small detail that changed my face amazingly. My new home was the town of Riverview in Oregon, a quiet place on the coast, far enough from Portland to feel safe, but not so remote that I felt cut off from the world. I rented a small cottage overlooking the ocean, modest but cozy, with a tiny garden where the first spring flowers had already begun to bloom. The first weeks after my escape were the hardest. I spent them in a motel on the outskirts of Seattle, constantly looking around, afraid that Ethan would find me. Dr. Murray called often, supporting me, giving me advice. "You're stronger than you think, Martha," he would say. "You've already done the hardest thing. You've escaped the trap. Now you need to move forward." And I did, step by step, day by day. When I got my new papers, I moved to Oregon. I rented a cottage, opened a bank account under a new name. I got a job as an accountant at a small company that organized boat trips. My savings and experience were enough to start a new life, but the past did not let go so easily. I regularly checked the news of Portland on the internet. 3 days after my escape, the first news item appeared: local woman missing. There was even a photo of me, an old one, looking tired and gray. Ethan told reporters how worried he was for his mentally unstable wife, who had disappeared after a period of intense depression. "We just want to know she's safe," he said with feigned concern. "She needs medical attention and family support." Liam and Zoe also appeared on the news, tearfully pleading for Mommy to come home. Their acting was flawless, concerned children worried about their mother. But I knew the truth. I knew that their concern was not for my safety and health, but for the fact that I had run away with the evidence of their crime. Dr. Murray helped me connect with a Portland police detective, Rachel Kim, who specialized in domestic violence. At first, we communicated only by email, through a secure server. I sent her copies of all the evidence I had gathered: photos of the pills, pictures of Ethan's basement, screenshots of his correspondence with the poison supplier. "It's not enough for a search warrant," she wrote after a few days of silence, "but I'm working on it. Can you send the pills themselves?" I sent her a bag of pills I had taken with me before I escaped. A week later, I received a reply. The analysis confirmed the presence of thallium compounds. "This is a powerful poison. You are lucky that you stopped taking them in time. Now I have grounds for a warrant." But even with this evidence, the case was slow to move forward. Ethan had connections, money, and a reputation as a respected man. I was the missing wife with mental problems. 2 months later, Detective Kim finally got a search warrant for Ethan's house. They found his laboratory in the basement, documents confirming the purchase of poison, even a diary where he planned my murder in detail. Ethan was arrested but released on bail. The news shook Portland. A respected businessman accused of attempted murder of his wife? Sensational! Liam and Zoe defended their father, claiming that I made it all up because of my mental problems. But the police also found evidence of their involvement: messages where they discussed the plan, financial documents showing that they had already planned how to spend the insurance money. A preliminary hearing was held last month. I was not physically present, but testified via video link, with a changed voice and without showing my face. I saw Ethan, Liam, and Zoe on the screen. All three of them looked shocked that their perfect plan had been ruined. The trial was scheduled for next month. Detective Kim was confident in the verdict. "With this evidence, the jury will have no doubt. Prepare for your story to become public, but don't worry, your new identity will remain protected." I sipped my coffee and put the newspaper down. Outside the window, the waves crashed, reminding me that life goes on no matter what. My new life. I got up and started to get ready for work. Now I was working part-time, 3 times a week. It was enough to pay the bills and even have a small savings. And in my free time, I did what I had always dreamed of, but never dared to do: painting. It started by accident. One day, while wandering on the beach, I picked up a strangely shaped piece of driftwood. It reminded me of a bird in flight. At home, I took a pencil and tried to draw what I saw. The drawing turned out to be inept, but something in the process fascinated me. The next day, I bought a sketchbook and a simple set of pencils. Now, my drawings adorned the walls of the cottage, the sea in different moods, birds, flowers from my garden. Nothing outstanding, but they were mine. My creativity, my voice, my freedom. After packing, I left the house and headed to the small office of the travel company where I worked. It took me 20 minutes on foot along the coast, a pleasant walk during which I could enjoy the fresh sea air and a sense of independence. Along the way, I met Mike, an elderly fisherman who often sat on the pier with his fishing rod. We had met a few months ago when I stopped to ask him if he was having a good day. "Good morning, Ellen." He greeted me with a smile. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" "It is," I agreed. "Did you catch anything today?" "A couple of perch." He pointed to a bucket nearby. "They're as fresh as they come." "Thanks, Mike. I'll pick them up on the way back." We talked a little more about the weather and the forecast for the week. Then I said goodbye and moved on. Such simple, everyday conversations now brought me real joy. No one criticized, humiliated, or controlled my every word. I could be myself, or at least the new me that I had decided to become. I was met at the office by Susan, the owner of the company, an energetic woman in her mid-60s with gray hair and a loose bun and a sunburnt face. "Oh, Ellen, it's good you're here early," she exclaimed, spreading out some papers on the desk. I hung up my jacket and walked over to the desk. Susan wanted to organize a special tour for photographers, the mysterious caves of the coast, and needed a financial plan. I spent the next few hours doing the math: the cost of the boat, fuel, guide fees, insurance. The work calmed me down with its concreteness and logic. The numbers never lied, never cheated. At lunchtime, Jenny, a young girl who worked as a boat guide, came into the office. She brought us lunch, sandwiches from a local bakery. "How are you, Ellen?" she asked, sitting down next to me. "Has Susan tortured you with her new ideas yet?" "I like this one," I replied, taking a bite of my sandwich. "I think the photo tour could be a success." "By the way," Jenny mentioned, "don't forget about tomorrow night. Barbecue on the beach. The whole office will be there." I nodded. This was another new aspect of my life's social events that I went to voluntarily, not under pressure. In the first months, I refused all invitations, still afraid to open up to people. But gradually, step by step, I began to come out of my loneliness. Now I have, if not friends, at least pleasant acquaintances. In addition to colleagues from work, they were neighbors. The elderly Thompson couple, who often invited me to tea. Rachel from the bookstore, who put away interesting new books for me. Greg, a yoga instructor whose classes I started attending last month. After work, I returned home the same way along the coast, stopping at the pier to pick up the promised perch from Mike. At home, I cooked the fish according to a recipe I found online and had dinner sitting on the terrace overlooking the ocean. The evening sky was colored pink and purple as the sun began to sink below the horizon. I looked at this beauty and thought about my new life. Was I happy? Probably not yet. I had experienced too much pain and betrayal, but I was free, and I was gradually learning to be myself. After dinner, I checked my email. There were several work-related messages from Susan and one from Detective Kim. "New evidence," she wrote. "We found entries in Zoe's diary where she describes the poisoning plan in detail. Also, a neighbor has agreed to testify about Ethan's suspicious behavior. Your case is getting stronger every day." I replied with a short thank you and closed my laptop. Surprisingly, the news of the court case no longer caused such a strong emotional response as before. It was as if it was happening to someone else, not me. Perhaps it was a defense mechanism, a way to distance myself from the trauma. Or maybe I was really starting a new life. Before going to bed, as usual, I went to the website of the local Portland newspaper, and I saw a news story that made my heart clench. Ethan Bennett, accused of attempted murder of his wife, released on house arrest due to health problems. The article mentioned that he was diagnosed with a serious heart condition, and the court agreed to relax the conditions of his detention until the trial began. But his passport was confiscated, and he had to wear an electronic bracelet. I closed the page, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. There was no pleasure in his illness, but there was no pity either, only fatigue and a desire for it to finally be over. I went to bed and tried to sleep, but my thoughts were whirling around in my head. I remembered my past life, my house in Portland, The years I spent with the man who eventually decided to kill me. How could I have been so blind? Were there signs that I had ignored? Could I have changed anything? But then I remembered Dr. Murray's words. Don't blame yourself, Martha. You were a victim, not an executioner, not an accomplice, but a victim. And the fact that you escaped from this circle of violence already makes you a heroine. With this thought, I finally fell asleep. The next day began as usual with coffee on the terrace, but something changed in me after yesterday's news. I decided it was time to take another step forward. I took out my phone and dialed Detective Kim's number. I want to be present at the trial, I said when she answered. In person, not via video. A pause on the other end. Are you sure? She finally asked. That means they will see you. Your new identity could be revealed. I'll be wearing a wig, makeup, but I want to look them in the eye when I tell my story. I want them to know that they haven't broken me. I understand. The detective's voice softened. We can arrange that. I will take care of your safety. After this conversation, I felt strangely relieved, as if I had lifted another burden. Yes, I will have to face the past again, but now I will be stronger. No longer the scared, addicted Marta, but a new person who has chosen freedom. In the afternoon, I went to the beach, not to work, not to walk, but to paint. I took my sketchbook and pencils with me, sat down on my favorite rock, and started sketching the sea. Suddenly, my hand drew a woman's face, young, with big eyes and a light smile. I looked at the picture, not realizing who I had drawn, until I realized it was me. Not the 55-year-old Ellen of today, and not the depressed Marta of old, but the girl I could have become if I had made a different choice 30 years ago. If I had believed in myself instead of giving up control of my life to others. Tears blurred my eyes, but they were not tears of regret. They were more like acceptance. Acceptance of a past that cannot be changed and a future that can still be created. I added a few more touches to the drawing and wrote at the bottom, "It's never too late to start over." Then I closed the album and returned home, feeling strangely calm. In the evening, she had a barbecue on the beach with her colleagues. Susan organized everything with her usual energy: grilling, drinks, music. People were laughing, talking, sharing stories. I was sitting a little to the side, watching the fire and listening to the conversations. Don't be lonely here. Peter, the new captain of the tour boat, suddenly appeared next to me. He sat down next to me, handing me a plate of grilled vegetables and a glass of wine. Thanks, I took the plate. I just like to watch. I understand, he nodded. I sometimes prefer watching to participating too. You've been here recently, right? 6 months, I replied. And how do you like Riverview? I like it. It's a quiet place, nice people, perfect for a fresh start. He smiled, noticing my surprise. You have that look about you, you know. A man who has left something behind. You're very observant, I said. Yeah, you could say that. A new beginning. That's good, he said simply. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. We talked some more about work, about the sea, about the books we had read recently. Peter turned out to be an interesting conversationalist, attentive, with a good sense of humor, but without the intrusiveness that had always frightened me in men after living with Ethan. When the party began to break up, he offered to walk me home. Thanks, but I'd rather be alone, I replied. He nodded without insisting. Of course. Sure. I said goodbye to everyone and walked home. The night was quiet. Only the sound of the waves accompanied my walk. I thought about the evening, about the people I had met over the months, about how I was gradually opening up to the world, allowing myself to trust again. At home, I took a shower, changed into pajamas, and sat on the terrace with my laptop. I opened a text editor and started writing. At first, just thoughts, impressions of the day, then memories, and finally, her story. The story of Martha Bennett, who almost died at the hands of her own family, but found the strength to start a new life. I wrote until late at night, pouring out everything that had accumulated over the months. When I finished, it was well after midnight. I saved the file called My Truth and closed my laptop. Maybe someday I will publish this story. Perhaps it will help other women who are trapped in violence and control. But for now, it helped me. It cleansed my soul, gave me a sense of completion. 2 weeks later, I flew to Portland for the trial. Detective Kim picked me up at the airport and drove me to the hotel, where she booked a room under an assumed name. "Tomorrow is a big day," she said as she walked me to my room. "Are you ready?" I said. "I am," I replied. And I was. In the morning, I put on a dark suit that I had bought especially for this day, a blonde wig, and did makeup that significantly changed my features. A stranger was reflected in the mirror. A confident, strong woman, not like the former Marta or the current Ellen. There were many people in the courtroom: journalists, curious people, lawyers. I sat in a special room, waiting for my call. When I was finally invited, my heart was pounding, but my hands were not shaking. I entered the room and immediately saw them: Ethan, Liam, and Zoe sitting at the defense table. They looked smaller than in my memories, less threatening. Just three people who had made a terrible choice. When I testified, told them about the years of psychological abuse, about the murder plots, about the fear and despair, I looked directly at them. I saw Ethan turn pale, Liam look down, Zoe start to bite her lips nervously. They recognized me, despite the wig and makeup. They saw the strength in my eyes that they had never noticed before, and perhaps for the first time, they realized that they had lost. After the trial, Detective Kim drove me back to the airport. "The verdict will be in a week," she said, "but with this evidence and your testimony, there is no doubt." "You know," I replied, looking out the window at the city that had once been my home, "I don't feel hate anymore, only regret. Regret for the wasted years and for the fact that they turned out to be such people." "That means you're really moving forward," the detective smiled. "Take care, Martha, or rather, Ellen." I returned to Riverview the next day. The sun was shining, the waves were crashing, life was going on. My new life. A week later, the news came. Ethan was sentenced to 20 years in prison for attempted murder. Liam and Zoe got 10 years each as accomplices. The insurance company canceled the policy and started its own investigation. I read the news while sitting on the terrace with a cup of morning coffee. I closed the page and looked at the ocean. I felt not joy, not triumph, but simply relief. Finally, justice had been done. Finally, I could truly let go of the past. That day, I went to the beach with my sketchbook and pencils. I sat down on my favorite stone and started drawing. Not the sea, not myself in the past, but the future, bright, full of possibilities. When I got home, there was a message from Peter on my answering machine. He was inviting me to dinner at a new restaurant near the harbor. I smiled and dialed his number. "Yes," I said when he answered. "I'd love to go to dinner,